Stephanie Dobson is back with us once again this week. Stephanie is a lawyer and mediator here in Lloydminster at Hankett Divorce Law and Mediation for another episode of Healthy, Thriving Family After Divorce. Stephanie, thank you for joining me once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stacey.
Well, we're continuing our theme for the month of November, which is division of property. And today we're going to get into basically more specifics, I guess, when it comes up to dividing households and what's involved with that, because there is a lot, as we found out last week.
Yeah.
So let's start out. Can you give me a definition, Stephanie, of what type of property we would be looking at when we're talking about household contents?
Well, most people, when they think of household goods, will think of items on the inside of their house. So things like kitchen items, bedroom contents, living room furniture, wall art, memorabilia, collections, that sort of thing. But household contents in my definition of it also can include things like appliances. It can include the contents of a garage, which can be quite substantial, tools, um, sort of little motorized vehicle, motorized items, pieces of equipment, outbuildings, sheds, lawn equipment, even decorative items. So in a separation or divorce, when we talk about household contents, what we're really looking at is items that will be lumped together in one category and then divided between the parties.
Okay, and when they're looking at doing this, Stephanie, do they have to be both living in the home or they've already separated, or does it matter when this is done?
Well, families can divide up their household contents anytime. Usually there's two steps to any division. So the first step is actually the planning for the division of the household contents. And then the second is actually the physical division of those contents. So there's no magic when this second step occurs, but best practice would be to have the discussion about how to divide the household contents, certainly before anyone physically moves out of the home. But sometimes it might be that one person ends up having to move out of the home with just minimal personal belongings, whether they're going to a temporary residence or their new residence is just a small place that they need to sort of work themselves into something bigger where they can take more household contents. But just to be very clear, just because someone moves out and they don't take all of the household contents that they're looking to take doesn't necessarily mean that they lose any entitlement to those household contents later on.
Okay, well, let's maybe do the step by step, Stephanie, when you're looking to divide the household contents, just to make it simpler, beginning to end. How does the process start?
Well, what I recommend is first, so this is when we're looking at, how do those household contents get divided between two parties. So first, we're going to create some kind of a master list of everything in the house, right? Everything that you consider a household content, we're going to put that onto a list. Then second step is we're going to value the item. So this is how much the items would sell for, not necessarily the replacement of that item. Third, so first we've listed it, then we valued it, and then we're going to pick who keeps what. Now, sometimes it's really hard to figure out who's going to keep what. So usually what I recommend doing is going through the whole house and figuring out, generally speaking, who would like to keep what. And then when there's any overlap in certain items, like both of you want to keep something or neither of you want to keep a particular thing, then, you would go from there and figure out how to break that tie. Or figure out how to get that thing sold. And then the fourth step is actually figuring out whether there's an equalization. So if you take everything that's in the one party's lump of stuff that they want to take and the other party's lump of stuff that they want to take, how equal or unequal is that from a value standpoint?
Now, what happens if they don't want to value or list everything? Because that could get a bit tedious in some households.
Yeah, there's lots of families that come to me and they say, look, we don't want to go through that whole process. And certainly we don't want to get our divorce professional involved in that whole process, listing everything item by item and valuing everything. What I say is that if both spouses agree that they've divided their household contents, that lump of stuff, that household contents divided satisfactorily, then, roughly equal, right? You could either say, this stuff for this stuff is about equal, or you could say we each got a couch and we each got the set of tools that we wanted. As long as there's not much as far as disparity when it comes to value, then as long as the parties are good with it, we just leave it be.
All right, well, let's go through some of the things that have to be divided up. So, in one case, in the first case, let's talk about wedding gifts. That's I don't even know how you begin to sort something like that.
Well, wedding gifts are traditionally gifts to both of you. So they're divisible as part of the separation or divorce. So, very often, when it comes down to the actual practicality of it, um, it's the spouse who was closer to that person who gave that gift that often will want to keep that from a sentimental point of view. But that still doesn't, we can't forget about the fact that that still has to be listed and valued as part of the household contents.
And then you kind of touched on it a little bit in your answer there, Stephanie. But what about sentimental items? There could be lots of disagreements, things like photos, maybe your kids' graduation photos, that sort of things. How do you go about splitting up those?
Oh dear. Well, in the age of the digital photos, that makes it a lot easier. You can make copies of those photos, electronic copies of those photos very easily. But in the case where there's some, childhood photos that are not digitally stored, it really makes it a lot more difficult. But it's really important to actually go through those albums and figure out how are you going to divide those. And sometimes families say, the kids' childhood photos we'll just give to the children, right? We'll divide them up between the children instead of each of us keeping them. But certainly it makes it easier when they're digital.
All right, Stephanie. Well, great advice as always. Lots to think about when it comes to this. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me, and we'll be back again next week.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacy.